Good morning, girls. How are you? This is lesson 10.5, solving trigonometric equations. I will be solving from your Algebra 2 textbook, page 686. Okay? So far, we've been doing solving because we were working from the pre-calculus book. We were solving already. It's not new. It's just practice or focusing on solving idea. And as I said before, solve means you will have to find theta. And how you find theta, you will have to refer to the unit circle at the end. Okay, so it's not verifying, not simplifying anything. And in this lesson, it has all the identities you've taken, half angle identities, whatever you've taken can come خلاص. يعني it's like summing it up, but in solving. So be ready with your identities, with your unit circle, and you can pause the video and try to solve because you already have an idea. The questions, the first part have asked us to solve each equation if 0 theta 360, يعني theta is between 0 degrees and 360 degrees. So they want the answers in degrees and they just want one unit circle. Okay, so no need to add pies or subtract pies or anything. It's just one unit circle. Okay, now for the first question, they gave me 2 sine theta. طبعا it started easily. 2 sine theta plus 1 equals to 0. I will isolate 2 sine theta equals to negative 1, and then sine theta equals to negative half. And then you will have to ask yourself where on the unit circle is sine theta equal to negative half. Here's our unit circle. Lovely unit circle. Where is sine theta equal to negative half? We said cosine sine, so sine theta is equal to negative half. Us and sine is positive here and there, sine is negative here and here, if you remember. And this is one of them where sine is negative. Now they want the answers in degrees. Anyways, I'm used to radians. This 210, and here's also sine equal to negative half. This one 330 اللي هي 11 pi over 6. So you will need one more step. I will zoom out. One more step just to write that theta is equal to 210 or 330. I'm sorry, degrees. طيب, how will I check my answer? It's very easy. Substitute your answer in the equation given. Put the 210 here and then 330 here, and you will know you are right or wrong. Okay, so 210 and 330 degrees are the answers. This question is similarly like any question like x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals to 0. But instead of x, here the function is cosine. So I think it's clear now that I need 2 brackets, and I'm gonna split cosine squared theta into cosine theta and cosine theta. And I'm gonna split the 1 into 1 and 1. And this will give me a 2 cosine theta in the middle, and you can check. Equals to 0. Remember, it's an equation. Okay, it's an equation equal to 0. So zero product property says either this is equal to 0 or this is equal to 0, but they're the same. So I have cosine theta plus 1 equals to 0, so cosine theta equals to negative 1. And the question is, when is cosine theta equal to negative 1? On the unit circle, it happens once. طيب, when here cosine theta is equal to 1, cosine theta is equal to negative 1. Only once. Okay, so at 180 or pi. So you will have to add that theta is equal to 180 degrees. Okay, so this is the answer. And here 210, 330 is the answer. Okay. The next question, I can see a double angle identity. And cosine 2 theta had 3 identities. Remember, one of them is 2 cosine squared theta minus 1. I think I will go for that one because I can see a cosine over here. So no need to go for the sine one. So I'll change this to 2 cosine squared theta minus 1. And I'll drop this down plus cosine theta equals to 0. Just rearrangement, 2 cosine squared theta plus cosine theta minus 1 equals to 0. So I will open 2 brackets. One of them is 2 cosine theta, and the other piece is cosine theta. Here I want the bigger one to be positive, so I'm gonna put positive 1 here to get a 2 cosine theta, and a negative 1 here to get a negative cosine theta, and when I multiply them I get negative 1 equals to 0. So one option here, cosine theta equals half and cosine theta equals 1. صح? When is cosine theta equal to half on the unit circle? Cosine is positive in the first and the fourth quadrant only. Okay, so here and here cosine theta equals to half هنا at the 60 degrees, and cosine theta equals to half at 300 degrees. So 60 and 300. For this one I have 60 and 300. Theta is equal to 60 degrees or 300 degrees. The camera is not clear. When is cosine theta equal to 1? It happens only at theta equals to 0 degrees. Okay, so you will just write the answer over here as 60 degrees, 300 degrees, and of course 0 degrees. The three of them, if you substitute them in this equation, will give you an answer as 0. Okay, but remember this is double, so 2 times 60 or 2 times 300 or 2 times 0. This one is very direct. عطول. Then cosine theta is equal to half, and when is cosine theta equal to half? We just got it over here, 60 and 300. So the answer 60 and 300 degrees. I'm trying to fix my camera. Okay, again you can substitute and check. Well, this one doesn't have any steps because directly the question is when is cosine theta equal to negative root of 3 over 2. Well, cosine is negative in the second and the third quadrant, right? So cosine negative root of 3 over 2 is this one, which is 150 and 210. So directly you would just write theta equals to 150 degrees because they want the answer in degrees, and 210 degrees, and unfortunately there are no steps in this question at all. I have plenty of questions to solve. I think even tomorrow I will solve more, and then we'll start our revision. So over here I have sine 2 theta equals root of 3 over 2. Negative actually, root of 3 over 2. Okay, we've taken double angle identities. For this one it is 2 sine theta cosine theta, right, equals to negative root of 3 over 2. Okay, I can send the 2 to the other side as a division. I'll get sine theta cosine theta equals to negative root of 3 over 4. Okay, actually I'm stuck here and I have no more work to do. I cannot. I would just think on the unit circle, when is sine theta multiplied by cosine theta equals to negative root of 3 over 4. This happens 4 times on the unit circle. Okay, so the first one is at 120 degrees. Over here, if I multiply root of 3 over 2 times negative half, you know, these coordinates and one positive and one negative would give me a negative root of 3 over 4. So 120 would work, and also 150 would work. If I multiply these, I'm gonna get negative root of 3 over 4. And here 300 هنا مش هينفع لأن both are negative وهنا both are positive. I want one positive, one negative. So over here 300 will work, and 330 will also work to give me a negative root of 3 over 4. So I would just write the answers over here because I do not have any more steps for this question. Theta is equal to 120 degrees or 150 degrees or 300 degrees or 330 degrees, and I will stop to this point here. Okay, here they said cosine 2 theta equals to this, and I know one of the cosine 2 theta that can be changed into sine, which is 1 minus 2 sine squared theta. Okay, equals to 8 minus 15 sine theta. I would always prefer the squared one to be positive, so I'm gonna take everybody to the right and set them equal to 0. I will have 2 sine squared theta minus 15, so I'll take this to the right and this to the right and change their signs. So it's going to be 8 minus 1, which is 7, plus 7 equals to 0. Looks like it's factorable. I will take this and write 2 sine theta. Sine theta. Probably I'll put the 7 here to get a 14. And I'll put a 1 here to get the 15. And because this is positive and this is negative, both of them have to be negative. There's no choice. This one will give you sine theta equals to half, and you'll ask yourself, when is that happening? And sine theta equals to 7. Did I ever say that sine theta is equal to 7? Aslan, my amplitude on the sine graph is 1 and negative 1. There's no option. This one I cannot get any answer from it. It's impossible. But sine theta equals to half is possible. Sine is positive in the first quadrant and in the second quadrant, and it's equal to half at 60 degrees. Actually at 30 degrees. Sine is half, 30 and 150. 30 and 150. So your answers here, theta is equal to 30 and 150. Theta is equal to 30 degrees for this one, or 150 degrees. The other one where sine theta is equal to 7, I cannot صراحة, this is an error, it's not true. Okay, regarding this one, I would probably think, as me, I would think which coordinates would give me, if I add them, the sine and the cosine, would give me 1. Okay, and this will happen at 0. If I add these, I'm gonna get 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. And if I add these, 0 plus 1 is 1. And that's it. And since they said from 0 to 360, so I can add also 360 to the answer. But I will show you some steps for that too. But anyways, the answer is theta is equal to 0 degrees, 90 degrees, and 360 degrees. If you want some steps for that, I can do that. If I send cosine to the other side, I get sine theta equals to 1 minus cosine theta. If I square both sides, okay, I'm gonna get sine squared theta equals 1 minus 2 cosine theta, remember 2ab, plus cosine squared theta. Okay, and actually if I take what would I do next? I can change this to 1 minus cosine squared theta, Pythagorean identity, and set it equal to 1, and here I still have minus 2 cosine theta plus cosine squared theta. I'm trying to prove something that I already know. Anyways, this is canceling this, and if I take this to this side, I'm gonna have 2 cosine squared theta minus 2 cosine theta equals to 0, and then I'm going to take 2 cosine theta as a common factor, and then I'm left with 1 cosine theta here, minus 1 equals to 0. Either 2 cosine theta is equal to 0, which means cosine theta equals to 0, either cosine theta equals to 1. Cosine theta equals to 1 is at 90 degrees, and here's this answer, and cosine theta equals to 0 is at 0 or 360 degrees, and here are the other two. So we proved it. The coming pack is asking us to solve each equation for all values of theta if theta is measured in radians. So your book wants us to get the answers in radians, which is not a problem for us. Here is a very, very direct question. I would just say 4 sine squared theta equals to 1. So sine squared theta equals to 1 over 4. So sine theta equals to plus or minus root of 1 over 4. So sine theta equals to plus or minus 1 over 2. صح؟ طيب, so I want every point where the sign on the unit circle is equal to plus or minus half. Okay, and here they didn't say this pack, okay, they did not say, they just said in radians, they did not say from 0 to 360. So I'll have to keep into consideration all the rounds, the possible rounds, which are infinity on the unit circle. When is sine equal to, the halves are, remember, the 1s over 6. So over here, I have one answer here that's positive, pi over 6, and here 5 pi over 6, that's positive, and here 7 pi over 6, which is negative half, and 11 pi over 6, which is negative half. How will I write that? I can write pi over 6, okay, plus 2n pi. Why do I mean 2n pi? Yani plus 1 whole round, that's pi over 6, okay? And I can write 5 pi over 6, this one, plus 2n pi. N is just an integer, it can be 1, yani plus 2 pi, I'm going back, plus 3 pi, plus 4 pi, and so on. I can also write this one where it's negative half, 7 pi over 6. And I can also write where the sign is negative, 11 pi over 6 plus 2n pi. Okay, so for now, my answers can be theta can equal to, as we said, the first one is pi over 6 plus 2n pi, means plus 2 pi or minus 2 pi or plus 4 pi or minus 4 pi. I will keep getting a sign that's a positive half, and sine theta can equal to 5 pi over 6 plus 2n pi plus 2n pi. Okay, I would rather do something else. Okay, what is the something else? I would rather say it's pi over 6 plus n pi, because the plus n pi would send me back to 7 pi over 6, so I don't need to write the 7 pi over 6 and the 11 pi over 6. So if I say pi over 6 plus n pi's, means plus 1 pi would get me here, plus another pi would get me here, and another pi would get me there if I subtract pi's. So I would catch up with these two instead. And the 5 pi over 6, if I add a pi to it, it would give me 11 pi over 6. And another pi, so maybe it's better to write it as n pi only. Okay, so otherwise I will have to write the other two as well and give them 2n pi. Okay, so this has covered all the points on the unit circle, which would give me plus or minus 1 over 2. Okay, regarding question number 10, here 2 cosine squared theta equals to 1. I think this is more than direct. I would just directly say cosine squared theta equals to half, and then cosine theta equals to plus or minus root of 1 over 2. So cosine theta equals to plus or minus 1 over root of 2. طيب, I will rationalize the denominator, so I'm gonna get cosine theta equals to plus or minus root of 2 over 2. Okay, so I want all the answers where the cosine is positive or negative. Root of 2 over 2 يعني كل الquarters, صح? All the quarters. This one, the cosine is root of 2 over 2. Here, negative root of 2 over 2. Here, negative root of 2 over 2. And here, root of 2 over 2. Okay, how will I express that? I can say pi over 4. Okay, if I want to go to this quarter, then I would say pi over 4 plus, okay, I'll tell you another way. I can do pi over 4 plus n pi. It would get me to here, but your book did something very pretty. This is a right angle, right? I hope you can see that. Get your pencil better. From here to here is 90 degrees, and you can calculate that anyways. So they said pi over 4 plus pi over 2n. Pi over 2n would get me to here, another pi over 2n would get me to here, pi over 2n would get me to there, and pi over 2n would get me here. بدل ما أكتب pi over 4 plus n pi's وأكتب كمان 3 pi over 4 plus n pi's would get me to here, I can cover it in one thing, saying one answer, pi over 4 plus pi over 2, yani plus 90 n. So plus 90 would get me here, plus another 90 would get me there, and plus 90 would get me here, and plus 90, and so on, or minus 90. So that's also possible and a shortcut to the answer, which is theta equals to pi over 4 plus pi over 2n. And again, n is just element of integers. Any integer, 1 or negative 1, 2 or negative 2, or even 0 would give me pi over 4 as the answer. Okay, question number 12. Here I have half angle identities. Okay, and this one was root of 1. Remember, the sign is the one with minus cosine theta over 2, and the cosine is the one with 1 plus cosine theta over 2, which is equal to root of 2. Okay, what would I do? I would probably square, and again, if you're gonna square, you have to square the whole side. Square this side, and don't forget the middle term, square this side. So over here, if I square the first term, just the root will go. It will be 1 minus cosine theta over 2. Plus 2 times this, yani 2 times square root of 1 minus cosine theta over 2 times square root of 1 plus cosine theta over 2. Okay? Plus this one squared, I would just remove the root. 1 plus cosine theta over 2. And here I would just remove the root, equals to 2. Okay? طيب, now I'm just trying to simplify this. Looks like complicated. Plus 2, I can put these all in one root. If I multiply this by, okay, I would just write it now. 1 minus cosine theta, 1 plus cosine theta, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Plus 1 plus cosine theta over 2, which is equal to 2. Okay, these are difference of squares, so first with first, last with last. 1 minus, you can cut it short if you are getting me. So 1 minus cosine squared theta over 4 plus 1 plus cosine theta over 2 equals to 2. And what is 1 minus, sorry, this is what I wrote. What is 1 minus cosine squared theta? It's sine squared theta, Pythagorean identity. So I can write again 1 minus cosine theta over 2 plus 2. And here I just changed this to sine squared theta over 4 under the root. Okay, these are all under the root until now. Plus 1 plus cosine theta over 2 over 2 equals to 2. Okay, this is a square and this is a square, right? I can remove this out as sine theta and this out of the root as 2. So I'll just copy again this one, plus 2 times sine squared theta would come out of the root as sine theta, and 4 will come out of the root as 2, plus these are just copying 1 plus cosine theta over 2 equals to 2. Okay, if I multiply everybody by 2, if I multiply the whole equation by 2, I'll get rid of this and this and this. I know you can see the simplifying over here. Anyways, I'm gonna get rid of all the 2's now. So 1 minus cosine theta plus 2 sine theta is getting shorter, plus 1 plus cosine theta is equal to, over here is gonna be equal to 4. صح? Okay, so I'm left with this is going to give me 2 sine theta. Actually, I have a negative cosine theta, not this one. Okay, negative cosine theta and cosine theta will cancel each other. This is still here, 2 sine theta. If I send the 2 to the other side, it would be 2 sine theta equals to 4 minus 2, which is 2. So sine theta equals to 1. And when is sine theta equal to 1? Sine theta is equal to 1 at pi over 2 plus 2n pi, right? I have a very small problem with this question, okay? And يعني شوية, bear with me. It's not going to be 2n pi actually. And why it's not going to be 2n pi? Because the question itself was theta over 2 and theta over 2. Now, if I substitute pi over 2, over here, I'm gonna get pi over 4, right? Okay, so sine theta is equal to 1 at pi over 2. مظبوط؟ طيب أنا عايزة أرجع نفس المكان ده تاني. Okay, so I thought if I add pi over 2 plus 2 pi, which is going to be 5 pi over 2, I'm going to go back to this question again, or to this part where the answer is 1. But I have a problem. If I use 2 and pi, it's 2 pi. So we said it's going to be 5 pi over 2, right? Now, if I substitute over here 5 pi over 2, هيكون 5 pi over 2 over 2, right? Which is going to be 5 pi over 4. Okay? And 5 pi over 4 is not here. 5 pi over 4 is here. Okay? And over here, sine theta is not equal to 1, like sine theta is equal to negative root of 2 over 2. So your answer will be wrong. Then what shall I do about this theta over 2? The only solution to it is not to add 2n pi, is to add 4n pi. Okay? And you can check your answers. Adding a 2 pi will not work, it will take you to another place. But adding a 4 pi, because I'm going to divide by 2 according to the question أصلا theta over 2. So adding a 4 n pi's would work here and not a 2 n pi, unfortunately. I'm very sorry, absolutely sorry for that. طيب هنا cosine 2 theta is a double angle identity. Well, I'm going to use the one that has cosines because this is cosine. So I'm going to put 2 cosine squared theta minus 1, and I'll drop this down, plus 4 cosine theta. Gonna take this to the left side, plus 3 equals to 0. I will get 2 cosine squared theta plus 4 cosine theta plus 2 equals to 0. I can divide the whole equation by 2 to make it simpler. So cosine squared theta plus 2 cosine theta plus 1 equals to 0. Cosine theta, 2 brackets. And here it has to be plus 1 equals to 0. So cosine theta equals to negative 1. When is cosine theta equal to negative 1? Only add pi plus 2 and pi. Okay? Because here I want all possible answers of theta and not only from 0 to 360. Okay, question number 14. Sine theta over 2 is a half angle identity, and it's the troublemaker again. Anyways, it's root of 1 minus cosine theta over 2. If I send this to the other side, it will be 1 minus cosine theta. Because I think squaring while it's on the right side would be much easier for me than squaring if the cosine was here, because I'm gonna get a middle term which is not lovely and full of roots. So كده I think it's easier. Over here, 1 minus cosine theta over 2 equals to 1 minus 2 cosine theta plus cosine squared theta. I think the coming step is to multiply everybody by 2. So 1 minus cosine theta equals to 2 minus 4 cosine theta plus 2 cosine squared theta. صح? I would rather leave this here, so I'm gonna send everybody to the other side and arrange. It will be 2 cosine squared theta minus 3 cosine theta plus 1 equals to 0. 2 brackets, 2 cosine theta and cosine theta, and I think I have to put a 1 here and a 1 there, and both of them are negative, equals to 0. So في واحدة cosine theta equals to half, or cosine theta equals to 1. When is cosine theta equal to half on the unit circle? It's equal to half at pi over 3 and at 5 pi over 3. And cosine theta is equal to 1, only add 0. Okay, the 0 I'm gonna add 2 and pi to it, there's no problem. Yani over here, if I substitute 0, I'm gonna 0 over here over 2 and cosine 0, it will give me 1, and you can try. And here 2 pi over 2, cosine 2 pi would give me 1, and 4 pi over 2, and so on. The problem, if you try pi over 3 plus 2 and pi, you will not get the answer, or 5 pi over 3 plus 2 and pi, you're not going to get the answer, because what you've got is going to be divided by 2. So we have to go in 4s as I did in the previous question, and it will be plus 4 and pi, plus this problem is not here. Anyways, it's only on this side, and you can check your answers anytime to know if you're right or wrong. Okay, I will stop this video until here, and I will make another video.